of the narco-criminal state that operates in that region, because nothing's going to happen until that's dealt with. And that means breaking the back of the deep reach that the narco-economy now has throughout that region. And there is, and Paul spoke about it earlier, there's a simple solution. Instead of dropping $150,000 high explosive bomb on a mud hut, because you might think there's Taliban there, just buy the drugs and burn it. Hell with the Senate's Council, let's turn it into pain, just burn it. Because I'll tell you, $150,000 goes a hell of a long way in Afghanistan as opposed to buying one precision munition. I mean, this is simple mathematics. One dead Canadian soldier, it costs the military about $1 million because you got to replace him, and that's a private. That's not a sergeant or an officer like a captain who's highly trained, who's got years in the military. So the guy who's sort of been in for about 3 years. We're talking fundamental numbers. You guys always hear about the LAV-3s everybody rides around in and the IEDs blow up. Depending on which configuration one of those vehicles is, you're talking a vehicle anywhere from $1.4 to $5 million. My God, you can do a lot with that.
Just a final point. You have to start with state building. Well, who's going to start with state building? You have to buy the poppy. Well, who's going to buy the poppy? Like, who is the force that's going to do these things? And I think if there ever was a time where the U.S. could play that kind of role, I think it's gone. And I think Americans and Canadians have to demand. There has to be something through the UN, I would guess. It's going to have some kind of armed force behind it, because you can't have state building, and you can't. But aren't we you're going to take on not just the Taliban. You're going to take on all of Karzai's allied warlords if you're taking on the drug business. So if there's going to be a role played here, it's going to need force, and it's going to need, but it can't be an American flag that leads it. It's so cheap to buy this poppy crop. The real point here is there's rational solutions, and I think the other important point that people that haven't been to Afghanistan need to know is most Afghans are not ideologically wedded to anything the Taliban believes in. Certainly in the villages, but urban Afghans were, what you saw in the film there, how Nellifer was dressed in the 1980s. She could have been in Toronto. She told me that in the 1980s, when she went to high school in Kabul, if somebody showed up in a burqa, they would have been laughed out of school. It was somebody like a country bumpkin had come in from the village to shop or something. Nobody dressed that way in the city. Afghans in Kandahar. Kandahar's famous for its women poets. In Mazar-e-Sharif, where we filmed, the university students are as clued into popular North American, European culture. They wear jeans whenever they can. There is a reservoir of people that want modernity. They want to be educated. They want a life like everybody else wants a life. There's not some predisposition except in the rural areas where people are believers. It's not too late, but the current policy is a disaster.
I had an opportunity in the past to work for the city morgue, and I saw the flag-draped coffins coming in from our Canadian soldiers. I have the utmost respect for our men and women in uniform and so forth, but I cannot stomach the idea that they are simply there to protect an energy pipeline or so forth. And my question is, what can we do to win over the hearts and minds? If the Taliban can destroy the poppies in a very short period of time, why can't we? And does anybody know of any kind of reconstruction that could be, that's ongoing and being done? If we can build infrastructure, if we can do something there for the people that the people can clearly see, then the way they look and the way they see North Americans might be a lot different. But currently, what I've been seeing over the past few years has been exactly the opposite.
Well, I can actually address that one right off the top, because I get to see certain things. And I was provided with a NATO analysis, and it's by happenstance that I recognized what I was looking at, because it showed a series of maps. And in the military, we call it death by PowerPoint, because it's a million slides and you just flick through them. But because I was flicking through them, what these slides were showing was where reconstruction was occurring and where subsequent Taliban attacks were occurring. Now, I have to preface this data is only valid up to about 2007, because after I went public with what I saw, of course, NATO didn't give me this material anymore. And what was clear from the pattern was the Taliban would watch where the reconstruction was going on. And then as NATO forces moved on to provide protection for the new reconstruction, the Taliban just came in behind them, knocked down the school, burnt down whatever it was. And there was just this circular event occurring. So things were constantly being rebuilt. Or you had to go back and fix something. And that addressed the issue of lack of security. And it was clear at that point that there was no security within Afghanistan because the most basic things were being destroyed. And we're not talking in the areas where the Canadians and the Americans are fighting. We're talking the NATO areas which are considered relatively safe at that time. So it's one thing to go in there and build stuff, and you only have to build basic infrastructure, nothing complex. I mean, the farcical highway that the Canadians built to supposedly help the Afghans get back and forth, that actually was built so a rapid reaction force could get up the road quickly to the forward observation points. I mean, the logic of this is inane.
Let's get real. I don't think we can win the hearts and minds of people. An occupying force cannot do that. You can't expect the US coming into Canada, occupying Canada, and then saying, okay, we'll start reconstruction, people will clap and say, yeah, very good. That's not going to happen, right?
I have to completely disagree with this. No, I completely disagree with this.
Okay.
Because I was in Kandahar and I talked to hundreds of people there.
Let me finish.
That's not what they were saying.
Okay.
That just doesn't happen. It happened. You can look at Iraq, similar situation. They tried reconstruction, nothing happened. Only when they started to give money did they started to recruit people, on their side. But the minute the money stops, they'll go on the other side. In Afghanistan, people were very, very tired of what had gone on, and so they, for a moment, gave a chance. They said, when that's the time you were there in Afghanistan, when almost 30 years of war now that people have seen in Afghanistan, they are really very, very tired. So when in 2001 they had this little window of opportunity, they saw the Taliban move away, they said, okay, we'll give these guys a chance. But very quickly they realized this is not happening. So I'm saying, let the process, the political process unfold. You have to allow that to happen. You cannot intervene. If the Taliban come to power, let them come to power, but they have to be defeated by the people. You can't have an outside force come and change things and expect that things will be hunky-dory tomorrow. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I really disagree. First of all, the natural course of development of Afghanistan has been completely screwed up by outside powers for decades. So the possibilities for ordinary people to resist either the warlords who are armed to the teeth or the Taliban who are armed to the teeth are very, very little. And that's the product of Western policy that got Afghanistan there. But that is where it is. There is no force at the moment that could take on warlords or Taliban. And if we talk about state building, I don't know what state building you're talking about, from who? The Taliban are not going to do state building. The American mission cannot succeed there. But the Afghan people were more than open, and I haven't been back, but I've certainly kept up to the story, and I've interviewed people, including Afghans, including journalists, Afghan journalists in Kabul, and the situation. Well, first of all, there's two parts to this. The south of Afghanistan, the Pashtun Afghanistan, is a whole different Afghanistan than Kabul in the north. So the loyalty amongst the Pashtun and the connection to the Taliban amongst Pashtun is quite a different thing than what exists in the whole northern half of Afghanistan, which have no allegiance to this. The second thing is there's quite a difference between the cities and the countryside. The cities are still mostly urbanized people, and those urbanized people want what most urbanized people want. And there's still the possibilities for that to happen. There has to be some will, some interest, and again, it goes back to where do you start your analysis? What's good for Canada, or what's good for US, or do you start for what's good for Afghans?
I think you can't disassociate Pakistan from Afghanistan. I think the two are, and they are linked historically. The northern part of Pakistan and Afghanistan were one territory. And it's only when the Durand Line was established by the British that this artificial separation has emerged. So I think you have to start in Pakistan, and that is, you have to start providing jobs to people. You have to ensure that education becomes widespread. The Swat Valley is where women have the highest literacy rate, and it is that same area which has been targeted by Taliban. So there is potential there. There are people who are pretty upset with the Taliban, but if there is a will, as far as the state is concerned, to do something about it, then the state is completely clueless in terms of what to do, and they don't have the will. Besides being a client of the US, they are being dictated to, and they follow those dictates. But if for a moment we have an independent government in Pakistan, and it does the kind of things that are needed to actually rebuild, and it has the capacity to rebuild the northern part of Pakistan. Once that starts to happen, it will also filter through to Afghanistan. I think that is the only way to possible.
I think a crucial part of this issue, we've talked about the drugs, what we haven't talked about are the weapons. I mean, the flow of illegal arms, and globally we know it's a huge problem, but in that part of the world it's crazy. There has to be some concerted international effort, not that everybody's willing to do it, because the worst perpetrators, the US and China, to some extent Russia, are obviously not willing to do this. But there has to be a curtailment of the flow of illegal arms through the rather questionable systems that we have globally. Because to cut the conflict, first of all, the drug money is generated for the purposes of purchasing arms. If you make arms really hard to purchase, it creates another blockage. I mean, if I can't come up and poke an AK in your face and say, do what I tell you to do, but we've got to go fisticuffs and knife to knife, you're going to be a little bit more inclined to take me on. You've got to be pragmatic. The Afghans are tough people. They've spent a lot of their history fighting. But give them a fair knife fight, if that's what it's got to come to. But if one side's got all the guns and all the money and all the bullets, what am I going to do as a farmer? I'm not going to argue with them. I've got a family to protect. So we have to stop the hypocrisy amongst the West, especially. I mean, my God, the Americans allow so much munitions to be shifted around the world under a litany of sort of systems that they have in place, And a perfect example, a historical example, is their support of the Khmer Rouge through their non-lethal weapons program that they had. So I provide you with all the boots, the uniforms, the food, all the stuff that you need to put soldiers in the field, but I don't give you any bullets. So somehow I'm morally okay in supporting the Khmer Rouge. I mean, there's the hypocrisy that we see all the time. And Afghanistan is no better. I mean, many of the weapons we see sitting in Afghanistan are the ones that were seized in Bosnia that were supposed to have gone to Iraq. I mean, and it's the same weapons killing people. And many of those weapons also ended up in Africa too. So we really do, you can't do these other things without really addressing the weapons issue as well.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Juhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington, there's a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through the myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had this great speaking voice and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement. that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower, who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country's governed is going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said, in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the real news.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.